Good afternoon. Let's get started. In New Delhi today, the Secretary General laid a wreath in honor of Mahatma Gandhi at the Rajghat Memorial as we mark the 150th anniversary of his birth. After the ceremony, the Secretary General told journalists that Gandhi's example demonstrates that the way to reach objectives is through nonviolence. He then joined Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi at the closing session of the Mahatma Gandhi International Sanitation Conference. The Secretary General told the participants that hosting an international conference on advocacy and action on sanitation was a fitting way to honor the 150th birthday of Mahatma Gandhi, someone who defended the right of sanitation for everyone. He added that ensuring that everyone has access to clean drinking water and people have access to sanitation facilities is urgent if we are to achieve the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. In the afternoon, the Secretary General held a bilateral meeting with Prime Minister Modi. He thanked the Prime Minister for the strong cooperation between India and the United Nations, especially in the support given to his reform efforts at the United Nations. The Secretary General also underscored the leadership role that India played in South-South cooperation. Following the lunch, the Secretary General addressed a group of young people at the India Habitat Center. He spoke to them about global challenges and answered their questions on a variety of topics. He spoke of the challenges facing the international community, including lack of trust, growing attacks on multilateralism, and climate change, to mention just a few. The Secretary General ended his day with remarks delivered at a meeting of the First General Assembly of the International Solar Alliance. He told the delegates at this meeting, initiated by India and France, that we still lack the political commitments to make the transformative decisions that will help to meet the goals set in the Paris Agreement. The International Solar Alliance, the Secretary General said, is a welcome initiative. Solar energy, he declared, is at the center of the renewable energy revolution. Our humanitarian colleagues tell us that as of today, the Indonesian government has confirmed that 1,234 people have died following the earthquake and tsunami in Sulawesi last week. Some 100 people are still missing, and 800 have been seriously injured. It is likely that these figures will increase as more areas become accessible. The UN resident coordinator in Indonesia, Anita Narodi, said that the government has significant experience and capacity to manage natural disasters. But given the scale and complexity of this emergency, combined with the response to the recent series of earthquakes in Lombok and the residual needs there, UN agencies and NGOs are working closely with the government ministries to provide all necessary technical support. UN agencies and others are already on the ground or are en route to the affected areas to provide assistance and to assess what is needed. The Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs says that needs are vast and people urgently require shelter, clean water, food, fuel, emergency medical care, and psychosocial support. Water remains the main issue, as most of the water supply infrastructure has been damaged. As we said yesterday, the government has welcomed specific offers of international assistance that are in line with identified humanitarian needs on the ground. For its part, UNICEF is concerned for the safety of thousands of children in the wake of the disaster, which is affecting a vulnerable population, particularly vulnerable children. The Indonesian Ministry of Social Affairs has requested UNICEF to deploy social workers to the affected area to support separated and unaccompanied children. The World Health Organization, which is coordinating closely with the Ministry of Health, is warning that the lack of shelter and damaged water sanitation facilities could lead to outbreaks of diarrhea and other communicable diseases. The World Food Programme is supporting the government in distributing emergency supplies. The WFP-operated UN Humanitarian Response Depot in Subang, Malaysia, is on standby for aid partners who want to release stocks. The UN mission in Afghanistan is concerned by the level of violence early in the campaigning period for the 20th of October parliamentary elections, including intimidation and attacks against candidates, their agents, and supporters. The mission condemns today's most serious incident that killed at least 14 civilians and wounded a further 42 when a suicide attacker struck at a campaign rally in Nangarhar. The attack appears to have deliberately targeted a crowd gathered at an electoral campaign event. Since campaigning formally commenced on the 20th of September, there have been several attacks resulting in the killing of a candidate and 3 security guards of another candidate, as well as the shooting of a further candidate's agent and son. Tadamichi Yamamoto, the Secretary General's Special Representative for Afghanistan, said that this violence, including today's reprehensible attack in Nangarhar, is an assault on the constitutional rights of the people of Afghanistan. The humanitarian coordinator in Ukraine, Osnat Lubrani, has expressed her sincere condolences to the families of 3 children who were killed, with 1 child injured, by explosive remnants in eastern Ukraine on the 30th of September. She appealed for immediate action to protect millions of people who face risks every day due to the extensive landmine and explosive ordnance contamination. Ms. Lubrani said that it is unacceptable that children face such lethal risks when playing with their friends or attending school. You can read more about this online. Yesterday afternoon, the Secretary General announced the appointment of Joanne Adamson of the United Kingdom as his new Deputy Special Representative in the UN Multidimensional Integrated Stabilization Mission in Mali, known as MINUSMA. Ms. Adamson succeeds Koen Devs of the Netherlands. The Secretary General is grateful to Mr. Devits for his important contribution to the work of MINUSMA. Ms. Adamson brings 30 years as a leader and policy specialist in peace and security with extensive experience in diplomacy, political affairs, and analysis, multilateral negotiations, and conflict resolution with the European Union, the UN, and the Diplomatic Service of the United Kingdom. More on this is available on our website. And today, I'm happy to announce that the Democratic Republic of the Congo has paid its regular budget dues in full. The honor roll now totals 142. And tomorrow, after this briefing, at 12:30 p.m. in this room, the President of the Security Council for October, Ambassador Sasha Sergio Laurenti Solis of Bolivia, will brief you on the program of work for October. And that is it for me. Are there any questions? At all? No? Okay. Yes, Carol.
Farhan, I wanted to ask on Macedonia, what would be the procedure for the name change at the UN following the referendum?
Well, I think we made clear the Secretary General's views in the statement that was issued yesterday that took note of the consultative referendum. The Secretary General now urges all political forces in the country to proceed with implementation through the country's institutions. And we've reiterated the commitment of the United Nations to provide all necessary support, if required, both through the Secretary General's personal envoy and through the relevant UN agencies, funds, and programs. But first, at this stage, we're waiting to see what the steps are within the country itself. Yes, Sidi.
Thank you, Farhan. A couple of follow-up questions on Indonesia. Has the UN been asked at all to coordinate international aid coming into the quake and tsunami struck area as it has in the past?
Well, as I pointed out, what our resident coordinator on the ground has said is that the government itself has significant experience and capacity to manage natural disasters. Yet, of course, the scale and complexity of this particular disaster need a different response. And so, as a result, UN agencies and NGOs are working closely with the government ministries. However, the government remains in charge of this process. Yes, Mr. Sato in the back.
Thank you, Farhan. About humanitarian assistance to DPRK, can you tell us any timeline for UN SURF, Central Emergency Response Fund, to support DPRK?
I don't have any details beyond what we've already announced. We announced that the Central Emergency Response Fund would contribute some money to this. And so we're in the stages of providing that. But if I can get more precision about how the money travels, I'll let you know. Yes.
Also on Indonesia, has anyone linked this to climate change, or is that too early for the specialists to define it?
Well, we'll leave it to the specialists on climate change to make their own evaluations. As you know, of course, there have always been natural disasters, and we've gone through phases where all parts of the world get hit with different natural disasters. What we've been noticing in recent years, and what the Secretary General has pointed out in his speeches, is that there is a growing frequency of certain types of disasters, whether it be hurricanes or droughts, that are related to the intensity of the climate in different areas. Intense heat, whether it's in the oceans or on land, has created its own repercussions, and we believe that the governments of the world, policymakers of the world, need to be aware of how this is affecting them. Yeah. One more before we go to Edie.
One more question on Cameroon. The government has said that it has defeated Boko Haram, but it still seems to have enough munitions left over to harass the Anglophones. Do you have any update on that?
Yeah, what I can say about this is that we remain concerned about the situation in the Anglophone regions of Cameroon and the impact that the violence is having on the civilian population. We urge all parties to fully respect international humanitarian and human rights law, guarantee the protection of civilians, and facilitate unimpeded humanitarian access to the northwest and southwest regions. The United Nations remains available to work with the Cameroonian authorities in their efforts to find a peaceful resolution of the crisis. Yes, Edie?
More a suggestion than a question. Yesterday we had an interesting wrap-up press conference on the General Assembly's general debate with the President of the General Assembly. Would it be possible to have a similar press conference with the Secretary General, particularly since his speech basically was quite worrying and concerning about the state of multilateralism, the state of the world, and it would be interesting to hear from him whether he saw anything or heard anything during the GA that might have changed his thoughts about the state of the world.
Well, we'll take note of your request and run it by him, but we're sure that he'll stay in touch with you, and we'll let you know whenever the next time is that he gives a press briefing. Yeah, Carol.
Farhan, similarly, in line with what Edie was saying, we heard the North Korean foreign minister say on the weekend that North Korea would not denuclearize until the U.S. took steps to build trust. Now, the Secretary General met with the North Korean foreign minister, I understand, and also with the South Korean president, and I understand there was a conversation with Pompeo after that. What is his view about the state of affairs? Does he share, perhaps, the concerns of the North Koreans that the Americans are not making a gesture?
Well, as you're aware, we had readouts of his various bilateral meetings, including the ones that you've mentioned, so I would refer you to the text of those. But beyond that, the Secretary General, as you know, has welcomed the sort of dialogue we've seen about a denuclearization. Obviously, no diplomatic process is uniformly smooth, but we remain hopeful that the parties will remain in dialogue and that this can contribute to the ultimate aim, which is the peaceful denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. Yes, Linda.
Thank you, Farhan. This is kind of a procedural question. On Saturday, the Syrian Deputy Prime Minister said that things are stable enough for refugees to come home. So I was just wondering how that works. For example, if there are refugees, whether they be in Germany or Lebanon or in different parts of the world, and they do want to go home to Syria, do they go through the UNHCR, or is there any UN facilitation in this?
The UN refugee agency, UNHCR, does facilitate or help to facilitate the return of refugees once the conditions are right and once the refugees themselves are willing to return, once they believe that they can return home safely. We do not compel anyone to return. And, of course, what this means is that in countries like Syria, what needs to happen first is you need to set conducive conditions on the ground to enable a large-scale refugee return. That takes a certain process, but that in turn would mean that we would need, first and foremost, to have an agreement to end the fighting in Syria once and for all, and that's what we're working towards.
Just to follow up, what if there are thousands of Syrian refugees who decide that they're going to heed that call and they believe it's safe enough for them to go home, would the UN make its own decision? It is safe, it's not safe, or if the refugees want to voluntarily go home, would the UN facilitate them?
If they're seeking that, we can assist as needed. But like I said, there are many countries, including, unfortunately, Syria, where there's still a lot of danger and the threat of violence on the ground. So for us, the priority is ultimately to put a stop to that. Yes. Yes, Carol.
Farhan, I noticed there are updates to the Conduct and Discipline website. I have a hard time reading that website. Do you have anything, more cases of peacekeeping misconduct that you can report on?
Yeah, I'm not sure what specifically you're referring to, but we can talk about this. We can talk about this afterwards, and if there's any particular cases, and I'll follow up with you on that. Bless you.
Thank you.
Okay. Yes.
Emmanuel from BBC Africa. 2 U.S. senators have requested the UN General, the Secretary General, to start investigations into the killings of 3 Russian journalists in July in the Central African Republic. I wonder if you have an update on that.
All I have to say about this is what we've said, that the UN mission on the ground, MINUSCA, has been working to help out as it can with this particular investigation. Obviously, the investigation is proceeding on the ground. Have a good afternoon, everyone.